morning. It's always nice to go first so that you can then sit and enjoy everybody else's presentations and not stress about anything. So today we're going to talk about building a culture of curiosity in the age of AI. And it's interesting, I looked back and in 20 and 21 I spoke here, and it was also about culture, and it was a lot about velocity. And what struck me was velocity, while extremely important, it kind of can be what we would call at AIP Publishing, and we'll get into that, and other people call it this too, a polarity. You know, curiosity takes time, and velocity is about spending less time. So I think one of the things that we'll talk about as we go through is the fact that there are things that we have to hold together in our brains at the same time, even though they appear to be opposite, and that's what makes culture hard, and that's what makes progress hard. And so what we're going to cover today is a little bit about transforming culture in general, a little bit about AIP Publishing and what we've been doing to transform culture, and then kind of pulling that back to curiosity and AI and why that's important. So one of the things I was thinking about when preparing this is we take a lot of things for granted, and sometimes it's really good to root ourselves in some basics before we have a discussion, even as basic as what is culture and why even bother transforming it. And so if you look kind of around, I numbered these so we could go around the circles together, but basically shared beliefs, values, and assumptions is pretty much what people would say is culture. And what's important about that is it really leads to how you work, how you process information. It's amplified by leaders, and it is embedded in organizational practices. So you run into it all the time, and sometimes in ways that are not helpful to you, and sometimes in ways that are very helpful. And the key thing about thinking about transformation is that what made us successful before isn't necessarily going to make us successful in the future. So culture, just like everything else, has to adapt because, well, I don't need to tell you that times change. So these are on more of a global scale. We've been dealing with a lot, right? AI, machine learning, remote work, social justice movements, political polarization. Let's not discuss the election today. That's why I'm here. I'm escaping. Economic shifts, inflation, privacy, security, and all of these things are things we have to, I hesitate to say react to, because you don't always want to be on your back heel. Some of these things you actually want to get in front of. And depending on your values and how you work together, sometimes that's harder than others. And it's not just globally. In the academic publishing industry, there's open research, open access, data sharing, ethics and integrities in research. I know we're going to have talks about research integrity today. Again, ML and AI, rapid publishing models, the peer review crisis, the idea that our whole peer review system is showing signs that it isn't really scalable, and some would say it's been showing those signs for a very long time. So what I would like to ask you all, and I want you to take a second to think about this, is do you feel confident that your organization can thrive in a changing world? How many of you feel like we have got this, we've got a great foundational culture, we know what we need to do, and we're good? Okay, the three of you, congratulations. That's, and thank you, Dan, for being one of them. So the reality is that culture change is really, really hard. And as I said, we're going to bring this back to AI, but I really think it's important to start with people, because at the end of the day, all that AI is and some of these other things is trying to get humans to act differently and to potentially even learn differently. So it comes back to this. So one of the things at American Institute of Publishers, we've been engaged in a cultural transformation for probably the better part of 4 years now. Now, we work with a consulting company called Coherence, and they provided this definition of culture, which is a lot more involved than values, beliefs, and assumptions. But what I like about this is the idea of developed and taught. Culture can be intentional. It doesn't have to just happen. You can take the reins and you can make efforts to change how your organization works. And at AIP, this is why I brought the glasses up. We definitely have spent a lot of time doing that. And just looking at this slide for a second, there are a few ways in which we have made culture transformation very intentional. So yes, we started with the usual, values and pulling people together and understanding not just what they believed in, but what we needed to be successful. So we came from a healthy culture, by the way. It's not that culture has to be unhealthy to need to be changed, to evolve. We came from a healthy culture that was extremely suited to a predictable environment, journals for 90 years. Who knew that was going to become something that wasn't predictable in the future? It was a predictable environment. It was kind of a command and control environment. People knew what they needed to do. And they got their instruction in certain ways. And again, a healthy environment, but an environment that wasn't necessarily well suited to experimentation, to learning through trial and error, failure, and how that's defined. Risk averse, potentially, because they really didn't need to take any risks. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but the theme is there. There was a lot of really long-standing stability, and now we're in a world with a lot less stability. So the culture that evolved around stability wasn't necessarily well suited for instability. And so we actually, in our strategic documents, we use something called the OGSM. I don't know, some of you are familiar with it. If you've been at Springer Nature, you probably are, because Dean Sanderson came from there and brought that to us. But it's a strategic framework. And one of the key strategies was a cultural strategy. So the first thing we did is we said, culture is front and center. This is important. We're going to understand the culture we want, and we're going to put it right in front of people all the time. And we really started to move from top-down decision-making to distributed decision-making. Most of the way we did that was using RACI-D. So it's not just RACI, but it's RACI, the D is for decision, which means right at the onset, we understand how decisions are going to be made. Is it authoritative? Is it consensus, et cetera? And who is involved in that decision? Who is the authoritative decider, et cetera? Now, what that does is it makes it very clear from the beginning what your role is and how you interact in a system. So it's easier to distribute decision-making when you're prepared for that from the very beginning. And so then we spent a lot of time, I won't go through all of these on the bottom, but coaching and training. And we actually went through many skills. So we took our values and we said these values really add up to these collective practices. And there are also a DEIB, like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that characteristics that we wanted to add into that. And on the right side is a decent snapshot of our curriculum. So you can see that meeting mastery, how many people waste time in meetings? Don't raise your hands, it'll be everybody. Decision making and how to make decisions, what you need for that. Mutual accountability, the RACI-D as I discussed, how to have challenging conversations, although in my team we renamed them productive because I didn't want them to have a negative connotation. But it's the same thing, how you negotiate and get to where you need to go in a conversation. Polarities, I introduced that a little bit when I started, managing transitions, delegation, all of these things were things that we felt were important. So, why is a culture of curiosity and a deliberate, intentional move to change your culture important now? So, let's think about what enables organizational curiosity for a second. Psychological safety. You need to feel free. You need to feel safe that you can talk about your opinion, you can hear others' opinions, and yes, you may not agree, but you're not being judged or shut down. You are participating. A growth mindset, again, wanting to learn, wanting to take the next step. Trust, which also underpins all of this. An appropriate level of risk tolerance, and also risk mitigation strategies, because quite frankly, it's a lot easier to be risk tolerant when you understand what the risks are and what you're going to do if they happen to occur. As I said, autonomy, shared purpose. Now, if you notice, it's kind of interesting. I think on the left side, we start almost at the individual level, and as we go to the right, and this happened by accident, I think we start to go to organizational characteristics, the idea that we have the same reason for being here. We're going to the same place. That helps me make better decisions because I understand what our destination is. Redefining failure. I am experimenting. Therefore, I start with a hypothesis which may or may not be true. And when it is not true, that is not a failure, that is a success because I have learned something. And then finally, accountability, because there has to be that balance. There has to be the balance between personal autonomy and safety and trust and the fact that you're accountable for something. There's something in your job. You have a job description and there's some expected result. So why does curiosity matter for Gen AI? I'm sure many of you read Ethan Mollick's blog, and if you don't, I highly recommend it. He's a professor, I believe, at Wharton, and he just has this fabulous way of explaining things, complicated things, in very simple, applied terms. You understand what it means to you when you read his blog. But I wanted to take a second and look at this excerpt here from this post, Latent Expertise, Everyone is an R&D. So when we look at AI, even the makers of whatever you want to call them, frontier foundation models, they have ideas, but they don't really know where things are headed. Certainly at maybe a grand level they have an idea, but how this is going to impact you in your organization and what's going to work for you, they can't necessarily be specific about that. They can give you ideas where to poke, where to prod, but poking and prodding is experimentation, right? So there is a necessity to experiment. There is a necessity to foster environments where you can try things and see what happens. And I could talk all day about the positive side of Gen AI, and I'm sure others will as well. But let's talk about some of the concerns for a second. Bias and fairness, quality and accuracy of assessments, transparency, accountability, ethical concerns, and one of the ones that didn't cut the list, just because I liked the balance of the slide as it was loss of human expertise. People fear that all of a sudden a machine is going to do something and humans are going to forget, just like they forgot how to add when they got a calculator, I guess. There's that going on. But when you think about how you mitigate these concerns, they all involve humans. People are going to help mitigate these concerns. People are going to be able to take the value and the positive sides of AI and help figure out how to manage the downsides and the concerns that we see. And those people need to be open-minded. They need to be curious. They can't shut down because something doesn't go the way they wanted. They need to take that and say, okay, what's next? Where do I go from here? So back to AIP for a second. We didn't start out with a culture transformation knowing anything about AI. It was late 2020, let's say early 2021, and it was a little while before, ChatGPT took the world by storm and was in everyone's hands. But what our culture did is it made us very able to say, hey, let's look at this and see what it does. And what did we do? Well, we did a few things. Some of them were very, very simple. Like I started a Teams chat for AI exploration. Initially, there were like 6 of us. And now it's more than 20% of the company because people kept saying, add me to that chat, add me to that chat. And it's vibrant, it's interesting, it's who's doing what, and it's everything from policy to peer review to, and then sometimes it becomes a hub that winds up spawning things to other chats that are about research integrity or about other things and where AI might impact that. And we have had many ideas from that, some of which we've acted on and started some explorations and prototypes with. So that's formed spaces for exploration. So on the bottom left, one of the first things we did was we said, it's going to cost some money, but let's just take 5,000 open access articles. Let's not even worry about a closed model, open model. Let's just make a sandbox with 5,000 articles, and let's see what we can do with that and just learn. And so before you knew it, those 6 people, and then the 8 people, and then the 10 people, and then our journal editors conference, everybody was playing in the sandbox. And they would come back with questions and ideas, and it wound up being the beginning of our innovation funnel in the area of AI. Like, what were real problems? Not just let's use AI for the sake of AI. But what are real problems that we could potentially solve with generative AI and other tools? We started to structure goals. So we took those innovations and we kind of funneled them into areas that we'd like to explore. We looked at them against our strategy and our capabilities and what was happening in the market. So for example, we weren't going to build a reviewer finder. Lots of people did that. So next, what do we want to play, what do we want to play with? And we did focus in on certain prototypes. And then we also realized, well, wait a second. If we have more people involved, then we can scale better. So Adam is here from AIP Publishing, and Adam and I are both on a steering group for purpose-led publishing, and one of, quite frankly, our most active streams is the AI work stream, and now we can't really talk about it, but we're about to move into a prototype phase for something we're going to launch next year, the three of us, AIP Publishing, American Physical Society, APS, and American Institute of Physics Publishing, to our editorial and research peer review community. So scale matters. Technology and thought partners. So there are people, we're always reaching out and learning from different people in the industry, and we have different partners helping us build things. So the idea, though, what I want to go back to is this isn't possible if you haven't invested in humans and understanding the conditions in which they can take advantage of and even define opportunities like this. So it always goes back to people. It's not just about investing in technology, because someone has to be there to do something with it. So none of this, absolutely none of this would work without curiosity, without a drive, without saying, wow, that looks weird, why? Let's figure it out. And we're fortunate that we've developed that at AIP. I mean, now, granted, we're not there yet. Culture is not a thing that's ever done. It just keeps getting adjusted. But if I had to sit back and honestly assess where we are, I would say we are past a tipping point. We've gotten to the point now where more people in our organization are on board and trying to act consistently with our culture than are not. And when I say trying, we also understand that we're not perfect. So we all, including me, mess up and do something that maybe wouldn't be consistent with our culture, and we help each other get better. So, I hate to say called out because it sounds so punitive, when the reality is it's more like a partnership. It's more like everyone trying to help each other get a little bit farther. So a couple of final thoughts. As I kind of said, AIP didn't start thinking about this when we thought about culture change, but it was absolutely foundational to our ability to quickly start to experiment in this area. And the polarities thing, the idea, the three that I pulled out there were inquiry, polarities, and enterprise mindset. And I personally think that of all the things we've learned, I mean, RACD is really important. There's lots of stuff that's really important. Those three are especially helpful here because enterprise mindset is making you say, this isn't just how it impacts me or my local team. How does this impact the organization? How does it help us achieve our goals? What is its impact on our customers? What can we do better to be more true to our brand promise, to who we are? Polarities are life. So I think I might have been saying this to Nikesh at lunch yesterday. Like, this is what separates excellence from adequacy, in my mind, is the idea that we all understand that there are conflicts. Engaging people, being really fast, there are things that we have to do all the time, and what makes us effective is our ability at a given time to understand where we need to be on that continuum for a particular purpose. Sometimes we may need more transparency. Sometimes we may need less. It's not that a lack of transparency is always bad or that full open transparency is always good. And the faster we learn to figure that out, the more effective we'll be and the easier it will be to get people on board with what we're doing, that we'll be able to speak to concerns that people have. And then inquiry, which, as I said, is you can't, I mean, honestly, if you're not curious, I would tell my kids this, like, dig a hole and jump in because you're done. Like, what's the point? Curiosity is growth. No growth, why bother being here? And one last point that I think is interesting to me is, so we are in an industry in academic publishing where expertise, rightly so, is highly valued. And I don't want to say that that is not a good thing, that we need experts. We need fact, we need truth. Again, let's not talk about the election. But AI is a fabulous equalizer because we all don't know anything about it. No matter how much we know, and some of us here know less or more than others, we all are really learning at the same time, at the same rate, whether you're in your career 2 years or 32 years, whether you are, at any level within an organization, at any position, we are all learning at the same time, and everyone's perspectives are valuable. So I find that really exciting because I think that opens the door for all of us to work together. And again, not even within our organizations, but even here. So thank you. Any comments? I want to hear from the people who said that they don't think their organizations are ready. Why?
Right, I'll say that again. I'm really interested in how you navigated through the working out of the great RACI matrix for the AIP. That's a really leading question, working at the IET, going through a rather major restructure at this moment, which is why I didn't put my hand up, as to whether we're in a good place for the future, because we're still restructuring. But yeah, the RACI thing is a thing that's front and center. So it sounds like you've made it through to the other side of that. How was it? What happened? All the rest of that good stuff.
So mostly, when I say tipping point, that applies to RACD too. So there are people that are really good at that within the organization. There are others that do things like they go off and fill it out and tell people. It's like, no, this is collaboration. You don't just give people assignments. But it was a lot of training and a lot of practice. A lot of the training that we do too is real work training. So we might learn something, but then we're sitting there with our real projects and we're saying, how does this work and who do we need to talk to? And we try to develop those muscles. We originally, back when I was talking with Alex before I even worked at AIP Publishing, we had talked a lot about holacracy. And what we landed on was that it was too far a leap for our organization to go from command and control hierarchy into something like holacracy for many reasons that we could talk about over drinks. And what RACD did was it gave us a really great way to basically create, if you know anything about holacracy, circles, and then they could dissipate if they weren't needed. So basically we can run projects that way and get people a lot more accustomed to cross-functional engagement. And so if someone for AIP Publishing were sitting here, they would say, well, we always worked cross-functionally. So there's a difference between showing up as your silo and working out a problem and showing up as an AIP Publishing person with a particular expertise and working out a problem. And that was what we were going for. It is nuanced, but it has a really big effect.
Thank you. Sean Loth from The Economist Group. On your slide that you had on the pitfalls of AI, bias and so on, you also had the solution is humans, right? Humans in the loop and humans doing something. And there was one which was, this one, and there was one which is not on this slide, which was degrading of our capabilities in some sort, like enfeeblement. Like we get too kind of accustomed to AI, we kind of delegate to AI, which I suppose is the flip side of curiosity, which is the title of your presentation. So I'm wondering, or rather I'd be interested to understand, how can we, as humans, guard against that enfeeblement that AI could potentially bring, both at an individual level as well as at an organization level?
So just thinking about this as you're talking, that's a very slippery slope, because I don't know about you, but when I was in grad school the first time, I had to invert matrices by hand. Thank you very much. I never want to do that again. I understand how it works, and I don't need to do it anymore. And so I think that that's part of the issue, is to understand what are truly I don't want to call them menial, because all work has value, but repetitive tasks or things that truly are limiting human potential as opposed to helping it expand. But then what are the fundamental things that people need to understand, even if they later get assistance in doing that? So I don't think there's a clear answer, but I still don't believe you can figure that out without people thinking about it, without people saying, well, in our organization, what kinds of things do we want to try to alleviate, to create, no one's getting more headcount. I don't know about you guys, but we're not. No one's getting more headcount. No one's getting more people. And we've historically thrown people at problems to solve them. So what are the places where we can take some of the burden off of humans and still enable them to grow expertise? Like, one of the things that you're making me think of is I was listening to a podcast or reading something somewhere where they were talking about how, like, from a programming perspective, the ones who do best with AI are actually mid-level programmers, because they understand how to even direct the AI, where the very junior folks don't do that. But if mid-level programmers and senior programmers, senior developers are using an AI, where are the junior people getting that experience? And so that's what we have to figure out. How does our education change in order to help grow our capabilities? So it's going to be different than it's been in the past. It's not going to necessarily be by this, boot camp kind of, coming up through the ranks. We have to figure out another way.
Hello, Ove Kehler from Mosibek. I couldn't agree more how important culture is for achieving also commercial goals, whatever goals. I wonder whether you have figured out a way to measure the progress with changing culture, as well as measure the impact of these changes on your bottom line effectively. Is there a way?
So you'll notice that implementation analysis-based strategic planning framework, is that the one? I'm trying to see now. So the point is, we're working on that. So, and I could show anybody who's interested. When it first started, myself and a few people, we came up with a culture index, a frame, and I could show you. And it was kind of like this 1 to 5 states of where we were and how we were progressing. And we had metrics tied to it. And the reality is, it was way too complex. The frame was good, but the way we came up with a number was very, very complex. And the measures we chose were too difficult to capture on a regular basis. So what we're doing now is we're actually doing a combination of a large survey in the end, in December we do that, and then 2 more times through the year we do what we call a pulse survey. So based on those collective practices, we have a 9-question survey derived from the same questions that were in our larger survey, but we've picked some so that we can see how certain things are moving throughout the year. It is imperfect, however, as anyone with data knows, if you try to collect it in the same way, in the same time, with the same humans, hopefully you see a trend over time, even if the number itself isn't the perfect number. You see if it's going up, if it's going down, and by how much, generally. So unfortunately, we are only relying on survey data for the whole organization, but for different areas, our strategy on culture is Strategy 5, and Strategy 5 has different sub-strategies, and there are metrics for each of those. So we do have some metrics there, but it would be nice if there was an easy way, and I don't think there is an easy way.
So in an organization where, like, the top leaders haven't been leading the culture change, how do you see the curiosity of the worker base being able to lead this type of change? Like, do you see that this has to start at the top, or can it start in the middle or at the bottom? Like, how do you see that?
That's a great question. I personally think it could start anywhere. So the reason I'm thinking about this is because it's fabulous when it starts with the executive team and everybody is playing from the same playbook. I mean, we had, as an executive team, months of training and coaching before we even started to do more things with more people so that we wouldn't accidentally give mixed signals or, steer people in various different directions. But if you look at culture change even that way, there are pockets where it's moving faster. So I would argue there can always be a pocket. Where a pocket gets challenging is if it starts to bump into other parts of the organization that aren't there yet, and then you need an advocate. So at AIP Publishing, we were working on this all at the same time, but for the transformation office, we've actually done more training than most of the other organizations. Like, my perspective was, we're the connective tissue. We're where people come for data. We're here working across the organization, so we need to be strategic partners. And to do that, we're going to really double down on some of these specific trainings on that your right side. And so I would get in meetings and I would hear things like, well, why should we be doing this if we're going to go in that group and they're not going to do it? And I said, okay, this is like what you're basically asking me is, Johnny's mom says he can do this and I can't. Like, that's what this boils down to. You decide, do you want to be a leader and do you want to model the kind of behavior and the way of working that we want to or do you want to perpetuate a cycle that isn't working for us? And on the other side, you do that, you try, and let's document process so that when we run into roadblocks, they're not personal. They're just, hey, we got here and we got stuck. And now let's think about why we got stuck. So that was like some ways to navigate the, what if you're going faster than another group? And then finally it was, I've got your back. If you really get stuck, and if you can't get that worked out, the management team and myself within the TO, we will help you figure it out. But it was true, like people would get frustrated because they would show up a certain way and they would get a certain response, not always, but sometimes. And that's why we got into those productive conversations. I said, okay, we need to equip you to call out that response and try to turn that around. Like, no one's going to be there to do it for you. This is part of being autonomous. I think we're good. Thank you so much.
Thanks.